Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to Movie Film. It's episode 302, brought to you by Mr. Boy Productions. I'm Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
Hey.
What's up?
We've been trying to schedule time to chat, so here we are. What are we going to do at this time?
You know, it's funny. I mean, this is a little earlier than we normally do, and I was telling you, I was sort of, as we were preparing, I was in my chair, but I was sort of slumped back, sort of like Scarface, and I was like, "Hey, Zachy!" Like, I realized I was going to have to sit up if I was going to change my energy.
You have to move your mountain of cocaine to one side,
Yeah,
so you can focus up.
yeah, and then dim down my neon sign that says "The world is yours." You know, as one has in their office,
as one tends to do. That's right.
Yeah.
What's been going on lately? You seen anything new or interesting?
Yeah, you know, actually, I'll throw this out here. I meant to a couple weeks ago when I had COVID. I was just looking for really, really mindless, easy to digest kind of stuff, and I got it in my head that I wanted to look up the old show Police Squad.
Oh, sure.
The movie The Naked Gun is based on,
That's
with
right.
Leslie Nielsen and everybody. And so it is really difficult to find, but I actually did find it through, I guess, legal means. It was on YouTube. Someone had uploaded episodes. I think I found it on YouTube.
So that would be extra legal, I think, right?
I suppose. I mean, I don't know if Paramount would be happy they're there. I have no idea. But man, if you're a fan, you've probably seen it. But if you're a fan of The Naked Gun,
Oh yeah, I have it on Blu-ray. I have.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I might pick those up because they were a little janky, but
Yeah.
oh man,
That's what I was like. 6 episodes. It's worth having on Blu-ray. Have a nice copy of it. You know.
yeah, they were really funny. I mean, it was like
Wait, you've never seen it before?
no. You know, when I think part 2 came out, they rebroadcast them on CBS, and there's only 6. So I feel like I watched at least 1 or 2 of them, but I mean, you know, there's some jokes that you see. They were like, "Oh, that's good. We got to do that again for the movie."
Yes, that's right.
Which is fascinating. But then you see all these other just hilarious Naked Gun, you know, Abrams Zucker level parody style jokes that were just a delight. It was like, I feel like I stumbled on like a little treasure chest if you're a fan of that comedy. So I would suggest seeking that out if that sounds interesting to people.
Well, you know, the phrase, you know, before its time gets thrown around a lot, right? This really was just ahead of its time.
Absolutely. And it's amazing that it still holds up.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, it's kind of timeless humor, really. I mean, I'm sure there's some things that haven't aged, you know, references to the 80s or whatever, but like by and large, they're just visual gags. They're slapstick and they're so funny.
Yeah, I mean, what they were really doing was parodying not just the content, but the style of like those old timey cop shows from the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, right.
And they would do this stuff where like the narrator would be like, "This week's episode," and he would say a name, but the title on screen was different.
Yes, every episode,
and that's just, you realize like that's like our style of humor, right?
Yeah, totally.
It really, you know, but you realize like back then, if you're talking about laugh track comedy, how do you convey to the audience that this is supposed to be funny? You know,
I know it's like you either sort of get it or you don't. And I'm sure today's audiences are conditioned for that. I mean, even The Simpsons you can tell, are just heavily inspired by that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that was really fun to watch. I'm remembering gags now, and I'm like, I don't want to just list them off. But
well, there's another gag, a recurring gag, which I thought was very funny, where they would be like, "This week's guest star, you know, William Shatner," and then you see that guest star get killed right then.
Yeah, it's during the opening like credits.
Yeah,
it'd be like, "This week, William Shatner," and they'd show him like walking around a corner and get stabbed. And you're like, "Ugh!" And that's it.
And that's
like,
it.
That's it for the episode. But yeah, the running gags with the shoe shine guy who's like the informant, and
so funny. It's so funny.
But I heard that the filmmakers said they were relieved when it was canceled because they were like, we can't keep doing this. Like we can't.
I know. No, that's really true.
And it makes
It's
sense. It would
yeah,
be,
absolutely.
it's like trying to come up with, I mean, if it's 6 hours, it's like trying to come up with 3 brilliant comedy films
Mm-hmm.
in a matter of weeks.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. Also, I wanted to mention I saw The Wild Robot. I was going to throw this out real quick because you suggested it a couple weeks ago, and
Man, isn't it good?
what a lovely movie. I
Yep.
you know, it's so funny because I realized even just a couple minutes in that I am very conditioned now to Pixar's specific sophistication.
Mm-hmm.
Where they obviously those movies, Pixar movies, are for all ages, but there is just a real sophistication in the filmmaking and the storytelling and the dialogue. And this is not, by the way, this is not a ding at all, but it felt like, oh, this is like a kids movie. You know what I mean? And it's having it's being a little sillier with the action and a little sillier with the camera work and stuff. But that is not. It was just something my mind had to calibrate to because the story itself is just really, really lovely and sweet. And I teared up a couple times. I laughed way more than I expected to. All the creatures that the robot encounters. It's a very good animated film. I definitely recommend it. I co-sign with Zachy. I definitely recommend it.
There you go.
But the ones I was going to mention real quick, because we had done the Sixth Sense commentary recently, Federica had never seen really Shyamalan's, if you want to call it, trilogy, where he kind of came out of the gate to the public with the just on fire. So Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs. And so I wasn't quite sure if she would enjoy Unbreakable, but I was like, let's do Signs. And man, I love that movie.
It's so good.
It's so good. I'm a sucker for we talked about Nope maybe about a year or a little more ago, and I really like that movie. I wish I loved it, but I really like it. And there's something to me about small scale alien movies where it's about people in a specific location specifically having to deal with this event. And that's what I love about Signs. There is a creepiness to it, and there are, little jump scares and things, but it's not a horror movie. It's truly about a family experiencing some sort of personal turmoil, and this event happens, and it's about them healing during the events of this thing. And the thing that happens with the aliens is so small scale but so effective. I mean, that whole climax in the living room is just, I mean, the way they reveal the alien in the television, I was like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. This is Shyamalan. This is why I'm still in his boat. You know what I mean? Like, good stuff. But it's funny too. It is slower paced than I remember.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like he definitely has a very sort of staid, tempered kind of style, which I think works to great effect often, especially with Sixth Sense and those sorts of things. And I do think it works in Signs, but it was noticeable to me, like, oh wow, I almost found myself leaning forward, waiting for the thing to speed up just like slightly. But that's the tone. That's the tone he was trying to set. I thought that was kind of interesting. But I'll throw out my theory again because I said it during the Sixth Sense commentary. It's interesting. You can see almost his entire career in those 3 movies. In the Sixth Sense, you see you see the twist, you see these great characters, you see like family dynamics, you see, the horror kind of element, whatever. Unbreakable, you can see where he's leaning a little bit into being sort of leisurely and indulgent, if I may. But although I do enjoy the indulgence in Unbreakable, but you can see where he's like, yeah, you're gonna wait. I'm gonna take 30 seconds to make this camera move over here, and you're gonna like it. And I think that works actually in Unbreakable, but you can see in later films where he starts to do that, and you aren't maybe tracking with the story as well and as patient. And in Signs, you can see then when he's leaning slightly into the pulpiness a little bit, and that would show up later in sort of films like Trap and that kind of thing. It's just funny. All the seeds are kind of there in those 3 films, and I feel like they all work. And then you can see them work maybe to lesser degrees in some of the later films. But that was a really fun one to.
It's been a while since I've seen it. I do plan to revisit it at some point. But the moment to me that when I think of Signs, what sticks out to me, it's not the stuff, the alien and all that. It's Mel Gibson's character having gone through this tragedy. He's a priest who underwent an experience that has shaken his faith.
Yep.
And you've got Rory Culkin, right? He's got asthma.
Yep. That's
right.
Yep.
and he's trying to so they're in the basement, and he's trying to get him through this event without having access to an inhaler, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how Gibson, he's just like talking to God. He's like, I hate you. And, you know, as he's trying to just work his way through his grief.
Literally the scene I associate with that movie.
Isn't that funny?
Yes. Isn't it more so than the alien and all that?
Yeah.
Like that's the story.
Right.
You know, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just so excited because that's so funny. When I was queuing it up, that was even the first scene that came to my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's first of all, it's a what I like is it's about somebody losing faith and finding that faith again.
Yes,
and that's refreshing to me.
I agree. It's
right?
a hopeful film.
Yeah, because we don't get those types of stories. And the other thing is like, goddamn, Mel Gibson, when he was like before all the shit.
Yep.
What a force of nature he was, you know?
It's really fascinating because, yes, as I was watching it, I was sort of wistful to sad, you know, with what's happened with him, because you watch it and you're like, damn, like he was a movie star, and you see what he brings to that role. This sort of, he's a little off kilter because of everything he's experienced. He's wounded, but there's also a warmth. There's a broken warmth. And it's so unique to him. And he's very, very good. Everybody is. Joaquin Phoenix, Cherry Jones.
Best Supporting Actor nominee, M. Night Shyamalan. I'm sorry, Father.
Yeah. Well, and there's the other scene. He'd cast himself in increasingly crucial roles to the narrative, and you're either distracted or you're amused, or hopefully you're just going along with it. But yeah, good. I like it. Like I said, it is interesting. I mean, it does feel a little more like slow. It's weird. Like the slow came to my mind a couple times when I was watching. I think maybe because I was watching it with someone who'd never seen it, and I was hoping it wasn't losing them at any point. But it was cool because like when things would happen, she'd pull her sweater over her eyes and stuff. I was like, okay, it's working.
It's working.
But yeah, good movie.
This is such a tangent. I remember because I got engaged in the early part of 2003, right? So it was shortly after, it was like a few months after Signs had come out. Right? Because that was summer of 2002.
Okay, yeah.
Right. And so one of my memories of shortly after getting engaged is being invited to there was like a get together at my in-laws house, and they had like people over and whatever. And it's like, oh, so you review movies. Oh, you studied film, huh? And I was like, yeah. And these are people I've never met before. These are like family friends, you know? Like, so what did you think of Signs? And I was like, oh, I really liked it. I thought it was great. And I get, why did you like that? Right. And I remember him in my head. I was like, oh, are we doing this now? Like,
wait, what do you mean? What?
Like, clearly they did not like Signs, and they were ready to throw down.
Interesting. It's funny because for so many reasons, the fact that it really isn't bombastic, the fact that it is so, I mean, I could see a person today even finding it hokey or corny or something, but it is just so optimistic and hopeful about people healing and finding, faith in anything again, and I did think, wow, it's this was a huge blockbuster in 2002. And I would hope it would still resonate today, but you do think like it really is from a moment, and maybe a movie like that wouldn't have exactly the same sort of ingredients today.
Right. You're right. I think that's what it comes. I mean, Signs was look at the top 5 of 2002, by the way. I just pulled this up. This is domestic box office.
Okay.
Spider-Man.
Of course. Yep.
Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Wait, hold on. Spider-Man was above Star Wars?
Yeah. Spider-Man was a bigger hit than Star Wars. I remember that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it beat it by 100 million.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. Signs is number 4.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So in those blockbuster company, this small scale family drama that happens to have aliens in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now hold on. Number 6, Brian. Number 6 is Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. That's number 6. Okay, but what was number 5?
I have no idea.
My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Wow. I remember that.
Right?
That was a moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's now a trilogy. So
that's true. Actually, you know what?
Like Lord of the Rings, we now have 2 trilogies. We have the Lord of the Rings and the Fat Greek Wedding.
The Greek Wedding, yes. I saw her. I was at one of those outdoor screening things where they have food trucks out here, and I was standing next to her waiting for my food, and I didn't know it was her.
Wow.
And there was someone called out like Gia or something like that for their food, and she turned to me and she goes, "Did they say Nia?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't think so." And I was like, "Wait a minute." And we chatted for like a minute, but I didn't.
Oh, that's great.
I didn't bring up like anything like that. We just talked about the event. But
you should have been like, "Why did you do that Big Fat Greek Wedding TV series? What were you thinking?" That's what I would have done.
No, I would have told her I was a Connie and Carla stan.
That would have been my second. Yeah, that would have been my second go-to.
I'll just say one more thing. It's funny because I'm not even going to like wholeheartedly recommend it, but I saw it out of curiosity, which was so for people who are fans of South Park, there's a classic episode featuring a restaurant called Casa Bonita, which is a Mexican restaurant where it's almost like Disneyland inside. And there's cliff divers, actual divers inside who dive into pools while you're eating, and caves and tunnels for you to go through. And I thought it was made up for the show, but my mom told me that it was real. Apparently they had one in Oklahoma, and there's a flagship one in Colorado. And it was during the pandemic, they were going to basically demolish it because it was beyond repair. And then Matt Stone and Trey Parker, being the Coloradans that they are, and having like a deep affinity for it, especially Trey, they're like, well, what if we bought it and we repaired it? And so that's what they did. And they made a documentary about it. It's called Casa Bonita, Mi Amor. And it's on Paramount Plus. And it really is just almost like a home repair show where you're watching them go in, and then they pull out, air conditioning tubes and show how much dirt was in there, and people were breathing while they were eating in there, and the cost goes up. First they have a $6 million repair budget, and then it goes up to 20, then it goes up to 30, and you sort of realize these are the only 2 people on the planet that could save this place, because A, they have the money, and B, who else, even if having that money, would spend it on this?
They care.
I gotta say, I found it's not, like I said, it's just kind of like watching a home repair show that's about 90 minutes, but it is compelling in its own way, because there is something satisfying about seeing something get dusted off and torn down and put back up into something beautiful. And it is kind of funny watching someone who makes a show that's so sarcastic and snipey and whatever be so sincere about this thing from his childhood. And so yeah, this isn't going to be for everybody. I could see some people being like, I get it, about 30 minutes in, but I found it very interesting and watchable.
Okay.
So I thought I'd throw it out there.
This is on Paramount Plus.
Paramount Plus, Casa Bonita, Mi Amor.
Okay. I wanted to mention I got to see Hans Zimmer in concert.
Yes, this is crazy. So tell me about this.
So he does this whole touring thing, Hans Zimmer Live, and it is, I've been down to the Hollywood Bowl with you, and we've gotten to see John Williams, and that's like watching a symphony, and that's a special experience all its own. I assumed this was that, but it's like a straight up rock concert.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean he's out there, like he's conducting, but you got people shredding on electric guitars, and you got light shows and everything, and Hans Zimmer comes out and bites the head off a bat. No, he doesn't, but that would be appropriate. It would not be out of place in a Hans Zimmer concert, I guess is what I'm saying.
So tell me about that. Is that then? Does he do like medleys of his music, and does he sort of reinterpret them? Because you were saying with John Williams, it's sort of like there's a full orchestra on stage, and it's pretty much 1-to-1 from what you're used to from
Right.
hearing on.
So yes to both. It's medleys that are reinterpreted. And so this is just off the top of my head. He did Wonder Woman, he did Man of Steel, he did a whole Dark Knight thing, he did Gladiator, Last Samurai, Interstellar,
Wow.
Lion King is the closeout. And he did a couple of things from Dune. And yeah, I mean, he's just got people up there and they're singing and doing this stuff. He actually had Lisa Gerrard up there doing the stuff from Gladiator.
Wow. Did you feel like you wanted to charge up a mountain after all that? I mean, that music is so like.
I just wanted to get up and say, "Are you not entertained?" To nobody. I'd be like Bruce Wayne in in Batman Forever. Remember, Harvey, I'm Batman, or whatever he says. That would be me shouting because the crowd was so into it. It was at the Oakland Arena.
Yeah,
the joint was very packed. We were somewhat in the nosebleeds. It was me and Hamza, my oldest. His first concert, by the way.
Really? Oh, well, amazing because it sounds like it was a really dazzling sort of experience. And he knows all the music, right?
He knows all the music, which is awesome. That's what made it fun. And you realize, like, Hans Zimmer is sort of this interesting, like, he's almost like the kind of like the tweener generation, right? Because I feel like Williams is a little older generation, and then now there's newer people like Henry Jackman and stuff, and Hans Zimmer sort of straddles both.
I totally agree. I mean, when you see Instagram Reels or TikToks or whatever, for a while there was a huge trend of sort of those like younger kids with the broccoli cuts playing Interstellar on pianos.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they'd be in malls and they played piano and everyone knew what it was, So yeah, I feel like I've sensed that.
Yeah, I mean, kids really like his music, and so and seeing the different suites play. Actually, during the Interstellar thing, there's this woman who, like, she was doing like a Cirque du Soleil type thing, and she's like lifted up on these like kind of curtain type things. They lifted her up all the way, and she's doing like pirouettes and stuff in the air. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's dangerous. Like I'm at that stage of my life where I'm like, be careful,
Dude, that's hilarious.
Yeah. It's very cool. What's funny is that he was here 2 Wednesdays in a row. It was like the first Wednesday of October, and then he came back the second Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And I had to choose which one to go to. I was like, I'll do the second one. That way I have a little more time to plan my schedule around it. And the first one, it turned out there was like a police lockdown at the arena that day. It was like trap. It was like
yes.
Right. So people were stuck. Nobody could go anywhere. And the concert was supposed to start at 7:30 and ended up starting at 9:30.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm like, well, dodged that one,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
and
man,
so he came out. He came out. He's like, if you were here last week, it wasn't my fault. But great experience. And I should say, I had known he was coming, and I was like, oh, that'd be fine. But Saud, who's a listener to this show, and I know he listens to this, so I wanted to make sure he lives in Chicago. He's like, man, that was an amazing experience. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try to make this happen. So it was at his prodding, which tells you that I am easily susceptible to peer pressure. That's
well, it's nice when it pays off.
Yeah. So and yeah, it was such a great, like, I'm glad that could be Hamza's first concert.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I
highly recommend. If you get the chance, you should definitely go see it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you told me about it, so I guess I was gonna say I feel like I heard about it, but I think it was through you. I'd love to catch something like that.
Yeah.
That music seems suited for a concert venue. I'm just picturing Man of Steel and all that stuff. It just pumps you up.
I'll tell you, I mean, that whole Gladiator suite just made me really excited to watch that movie with you and talk through it.
Yeah. I'm really excited to go back to that.
That's coming up. Also, I wanted to mention real quick, I have begun a rewatch of The Walking Dead.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So this happened because, I think I mentioned, they have the Daryl Dixon TV show starring Norman Reedus. Mm-hmm. And I did a review of that for the Wrap. Mm-hmm. And I really like it. It's very good.
That's good. That's amazing that they've found. So if they splinter off, there's like an opportunity to find a freshness in that universe.
I think so. I mean, yeah, what they're doing is they're sort of creating these character-centric spin-offs in different locales. So there's another show called Dead City, which stars Lauren Cohen and Jeffrey Dean Morgan as their characters, and they're in New York, which we've never seen.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, and they did a thing with Andrew Lincoln earlier this year. So I was kind of like, maybe give this, it had been a while, and I was like, maybe kind of, I was looking around the edges of watching it again, and I was actually thinking of, because there's a show called Fear the Walking Dead, which is kind of a prequel,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, maybe I'll start there, and it shows the beginnings of the zombie virus, and then watch it chronologically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then my oldest, he was like, "Hey, are you watching Walking Dead? I want to watch it too." And I was like, "Well, all right. Well, you should start with Walking Dead then, you know?"
Yeah.
So we started watching, and then now my 13-year-old's like, "Oh, I want to watch it too," and I'm like, "Well, God damn it!" It's harder now, because you can't just rattle off episodes. But anyway, my point is this: we've been kind of working our way through it, and we're up to the 3rd season right now. And the only point I'm making is, God damn, this show was such a banger when it started.
Yeah.
It really, like, it was like a rocket ride,
Right. I mean, I remember it was a cultural phenomenon.
It really was, and as all things do, it cooled off, and a lot of people fell away, and I feel like that's why I'm going into this rewatch with a different headspace, where I'm like, well, I kind of know all the big swerves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I already know who dies when, and so I can just sort of experience it, and I'm not watching it over the course of 11 years.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So I want to see how it plays, whether it plays differently,
Yeah.
Because in my review of Daryl Dixon, I talked about how, when the show first started, when Walking Dead first started, there was a, among the audience, there's, if Daryl dies, we riot, because he was such a favorite character, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that was part of I think I've talked about this on our show, like part watching that show, and you would see characters that you came to love, and they would die sometimes very horribly, and it eats into you, pun intended,
Yeah.
like, and I said, when it comes to Daryl Dixon, it's like, well, his name is in the show. His name is the title.
Yes, right.
So he's probably safe. And I said that, so you're not carrying this anticipatory trauma with you,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, now that I know how the show ends and sort of the twists and turns, I don't have that anticipatory trauma either, so I can just experience it in a different way.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm curious to see how it goes. Definitely in these early couple seasons, man, I'm reminded, wow, this was at its peak. It was amazing.
So I know it did go on for a very long time, and people eventually started dropping off. And I mean, do you feel like you're going to get to a point or where you are like, okay, this is about what you need to, so like if you're showing your kids The Simpsons, even though I know they love all The Simpsons, but you'd be like, all right, I want to show you 1 through 10. Yeah. And then it's kind of up to you.
So here's what I would say. Honestly, I think that the show, it ended up okay, is what I would say. So is it worth watching where you're just like knocking out an episode a day? Yes, I think so. Because I think it ends at a place where this is me, because what became harder for me in the middle of the run was I was just like, what is the happy ending here? What do I have to look forward to? And I would say now that the show is done, I think it ends at a place that I feel like, well, it's a somewhat hopeful place.
Okay.
And this is just me, I can't speak to other people who watch this stuff, that I kind of need that. I need something to hold on to.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Right. And so I feel like, given the totality of it, I'm okay with where things end, and the universe is continuing on. I would actually say the Andrew Lincoln series that they did earlier, Andrew Lincoln, who played Rick Grimes, was the main character, right? So he left the show during the 9th season, and his character just disappears.
Right.
So it continued on for another 3 seasons with Norman Reedus as the lead. And it was always like, well, what happened to Rick Grimes? And they were going to do a series of movies, and then they ended up doing like a miniseries. Yeah. And what I've said is, if you watch the entire series and then you go to that Rick Grimes series, it's a great finale. Like if that's the end of Walking Dead for you, perfect, pitch perfect.
Right.
Like I wouldn't change a thing. And I would say that the Rick Grimes series ends up making the whole show very good.
Wow. Okay.
Because I think that's ultimately it for me. It's like I want an emotionally satisfying ending. If that means doing something dark like Breaking Bad, that's fine. But just something that feels truthful, and I feel like they ended at a truthful place without spoiling anything.
This sounds like its own sort of MCU style,
Yeah,
experience where it's like you can stick with this thing if you want, but there are other little branches, but they all reward one another.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool. Very cool. Wait, how is your son liking them? Or sons, I suppose, if
They're both like, and it's crazy to realize that, when the show started, the original show, I mean, Hamza, he was 3.
Don't like hearing that. Wow.
Now he's, it's funny is he's watching The Sopranos, like just on his own.
Oh, really?
He's at that age. I mean, he's going to be 18 in a few months.
No, totally. It's just wild. It's wild too that would be like, what is that the equivalent of for me? Like when I was 18, if I was starting, I don't even know, like Columbo.
There was no equivalent.
Yeah, no. Well, there's no. Yeah. I mean,
when you were 18, The Sopranos had just started.
That's true. And by the way, I mean, it's a little embarrassing blind spot for me, but I've never seen it.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, and hey, maybe you and Hamza can watch that together.
Actually, that'd be fun, and then we can text each other. Yeah,
you can text each other, but he's only a few episodes in, so you can get caught up in a hurry.
Maybe I will start that. I've always meant to, and it's so cool that on the Max app or whatever they have all the old shows. So
yeah, it's funny because Amina saw that he was watching it. And she's like, "Oh, I've never seen it." I was like, "Oh, you should watch it. It's a good show." I was like, "Why don't you can watch it with him?" And so she goes, "Hey, I want to watch The Sopranos with you," and he goes, "Nope." He's like, "I'm not watching The Sopranos with my mom."
Yeah, I get that.
All right. Well, hey, Brian, we got some listener letters here.
All right, let's hear it.
So here's a note we got from Mike Snyder, and this is part of our ongoing series of people sharing their memorable movie-going experiences.
I love these.
So Mike says, love the show and listen to every episode. It's been great hearing other listeners share their stories of memorable theater-going experiences. And with The Penguin beginning to air on HBO, I thought maybe it would be time for me to share my journey with the film it spun off from. So this is a recent journey. He says 2020 was not an easy year for most, and for me, it housed what will go down as some of the absolute worst moments of my life. While the world shut down with COVID, my personal life fell apart as well, and by that summer, I found my marriage ending, my job non-existent, the short film I was going to make halted indefinitely, and the only things functioning to a high degree were my anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. So with nothing going right and no real options, I had to pack everything I owned into a U-Haul trailer and head back to West Michigan after 10 years in Los Angeles. The trip back home took 3 days. 3 days of swirling thoughts of uncertainty as a 15-year relationship came to an end, and the whole world sheltering and masking, preventing most normalcy from giving me any minute comfort. But on the first night at my hotel, I was catching up on the day's nerd news, and it was the day the very first trailer for The Batman was released. Alone in my hotel, trying to settle my anxious brain, I got a first look at Matt Reeves' take on the world of Gotham. I loved what I saw, the Zodiac style of the Riddler and the detective noir feel of Robert Pattinson as Batman. It was a touch of nerd joy in an otherwise bleak day. As the trailer ended, I see the release date and said to myself, things will be different once this movie comes out. Keep going. So while I anxiously awaited a new Batman movie, I did what I could. Back home, staying with my mom, I couldn't work much, but I could work on myself. I started therapy and really tried to face my mental health issues and process my grief of my divorce and also accept my responsibilities and faults and try and make some true changes to how I communicate and set healthy boundaries. March 2022 finally arrives. By this point, I had started dating again, and my girlfriend Elle knew the Batman was something I was very much looking forward to and came with me to the first showing at the Jefferson Point IMAX in Fort Wayne. I honestly wasn't sure I'd still be alive to see this moment, and here I was with an amazing partner who knew all the low points I'd gone through the last few years and showed me so much empathy and support. The lights dimmed and my blood pumped through all the trailers, and then the film started. For 3 hours, we were completely captivated and engrossed in this new vision of Gotham that felt so familiar. The Frank Miller Year One look and voiceover gave me chills, and the nods to Loeb and Sale's Long Halloween made me grin despite the grounded darkness of it all. But the real powerful moment was in the film's ending. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. This version of Bruce Wayne doesn't yet have the facade of a shallow playboy. He's still a broken and grieving man, not caring what really happens to him as his trauma is central to everything. But by the end of the film, as he's helping save people from the now flooded Gotham, his narration speaks to his growth beyond his grief. He says our scars can destroy us, even after the physical wounds have healed. But if we can survive them, they can give us the power to endure and the strength to fight. It's in this moment I felt completely understood in my pain and the journey I've been on to process it. The movie ended and we go to the car and just sit for a moment and I cry for what might have actually been the first time in the journey I was on. I have endured and grown beyond my scars. I come back to this monologue a lot. 2 years before, I didn't think I was still going to be alive when the Batman came out, and now it's been 2 years since. And in that time, I've developed an amazing and healthy relationship with Elle. I filmed and released my short film that's even gotten me award recognition. I have gone on my dream trip to Scotland, and I've bought a house. There's always going to be struggles and work to do, but I can honestly say I'm happier than ever. The Batman will always be a sacred movie for me. From its first trailer to its final release, it was one of the very few things that kept me looking forward instead of back. Movies are important. They mean so much to us. They represent moments in time in our lives. They can give us comfort or help us process our pain. I truly believe you both understand this, and the way you talk about film helps others feel seen in our deep emotional connection to film. Your show is important to your listeners, and I hope you both know the comfort and understanding you bring to others. If anyone that hears this is struggling, I hope you know you're cared about and valued and can find a movie to help you get past your dark moments. Keep going.
Wow. Man.
Yeah.
Thank you for writing that, Mike. That is just so powerful and inspiring. It speaks to so many things. I'm so happy for the place that you're in your life right now. And I get it. I do get that. We've talked about this with movies. Like, we just connect with them in a certain way. And I know us, I know our listeners, they do inspire us and motivate us and help us keep going through the other things that are important in our lives. And I just think this really meant a lot, that writing all that out and sharing all that. And that was really inspiring to me, and I hope it's inspiring to others too.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thanks, Mike. Thank you so much. Here's a note we got from Kenneth Watney, and you may remember in our 300th episode, I mentioned that Ken had created a Spotify playlist with all of our commentary tracks.
Yes. Oh, that's right. Yes.
And I was just utterly delighted by that. And so Kenneth heard his name and sent us a note. So I wanted to read what he said. He says, "Hi, Zachy and Brian. I wanted to start off by thanking you for shouting me out at the beginning of episode 300. I was walking to work when I heard Zachy say that someone had made a playlist of all your commentary tracks. My first thought was, oh, that's cool. Somebody else did that too. But then Zachy said my name, and I was beyond surprised. I'm so glad I could help catalog these for you on Spotify, even if it started out for my own convenience. I also wanted to really just say thank you for what you two are doing. 5 years ago, I moved from my hometown in South Dakota to Australia to get married to the love of my life. In moving, though, I lost a lot of the community aspect of movies with my friends. We used to have a weekly movie night or going to the cinema to see the new releases. I'd been missing that quite a bit. A few years ago, I found your podcast through your commentary tracks on the Star Wars films. Soon, I had listened to them and started listening to your regular episodes, and it started to feel like the conversations I used to have with my friends back home. Thank you, both of you, for this podcast. It truly does feel like listening to my friends talk about movies. Lastly, I just wanted to suggest a few commentary tracks that I think would be good. He recommends, so this is the Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
Commando. Men in Black.
Definitely.
Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
And Con Air.
Yeah, those are good. Ocean's 11. Yeah. It's one I'm kind of... Men in Black, I'm surprised we haven't done.
Men in Black, that's for sure going to happen. I would honestly, I suspect every single one of those we will get to at some point.
So. Yeah.
Some probably sooner than later, but I definitely, I mean, you know, at this point, We cast a very wide net, so
Yeah, we'll be doing industrial films at some point,
that's right. So yeah, I would expect all of those at some point. Some far sooner, but all of them eventually.
Yeah, and thank you, Kenneth. I mean, that's all we can hope for. I mean, I think you and I we've never really set out a mission statement for this thing, but when I do sit down and think about what are we trying to do or what are we doing here, I really do want this to feel like we're all at a table and we're just talking about, oh, did you hear about this week? And oh, did you see that trailer? And when you get out of a movie and you're like, okay, first things first, I have to talk about this. And so this note really, really makes me happy. And I'm really happy that Kenneth feels that way.
See, I like to think we're all sitting at a table and you and I are the obnoxious guys who aren't letting anyone else. That's my mission statement. That's my mission statement for this show, really.
Yes.
Thank you, Ken, for that. And then lastly, we have a note from Danny Coles, who messaged us through Patreon. In the last 2 weeks, we started up a Patreon, which, by the way, seriously, thank you so much for everybody who has already signed up for that.
It's so humbling and rewarding. Yes, thank you.
We've gotten many messages saying something to the equivalent of, "Finally, what took you guys so long?"
Yeah, which was actually really encouraging.
Yeah, so I blame Brian. I have to be honest. And with that, this is a note that Danny Cole sent us through Patreon. And he says, I proudly became a member of your show today. I've been an avid listener since the show began. Over the last 2 years, I've experienced the most profound changes in my life, becoming a single parent and witnessing the collapse of my self-esteem. Having gone through a divorce, one of the things that made life bearable was the chance to be transported to another place or someone's life by watching a movie. I wanted to reach out and express how listening to your show over this period has given me such comfort. Listening to two people who have a genuine connection with each other and love the subjects they talk about has given me something to look forward to when I was just really down. I'd go and run 20 miles to outrun my frustration and anger while listening to you both. You both helped me come out the other side of my dark journey, and while I'm not yet completely out the other side, your show is always a highlight of my week. Thank you for your show and just for being yourselves.
Oh, thank you, Danny.
It's a nice feeling, I have to say, because yeah, we obviously, if people are moved to sign up to the Patreon, that says something to me.
Yeah. And I just, certainly that, I mean, thank you so much for the support. And also, I don't know, I just kind of want to send out some love. You know what I mean? If I'm being honest, it's been a kind of difficult year for me also. And this show, interacting with these messages and just going to see movies. Actually, it's so funny. I might have mentioned it. I don't remember, but I was having a all-time worst day this year. The day I saw Trap.
Okay.
And I mean, tears, bad day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because it was well, I want to see this. I want to see it for the show. Let's go do this. And man, the movie's goofy. The movie's silly. But I walked out completely flipped. I was just smiling, kind of amused by it. What? Is it silly? Is it dumb? Yeah. But you know what? I was transported. I felt better than I did when I walked in. And that's movies, man. And it's just so cool having this community here where we can all kind of relate to that, where we get touched in a certain sort of way with these things, and it helps us push through. And I really want to just say, I guess what I really want to say too is I just appreciate these people putting it out there like that, because I'm sure there are many other people listening, and I'm putting myself in there with it. It's just really encouraging and nice to know that we have this thing here, and we share this thing, and we can encourage each other, as we go through it. This thing called life, Zachy.
Wow.
Really. I really mean that. I said it's kind of silly, but I really mean that. My heart is with everybody.
We've gone on quite the emotional journey this episode.
Yeah. But isn't that awesome? I don't know.
Well, I wanted to mention real quick a message you and I got from Pervez Ahmed with regards to our previous discussion about Joker, Folie à Deux.
Yes.
He says, hey, gentlemen, I enjoyed the latest episode discussing Joker 2. I probably enjoyed it more than Brian, and definitely didn't dislike it as much as Zach, which I don't know I don't remember what I said, to be honest, but I don't know if I was spitting fire at it.
I do. I feel that is how I remembered it, where I was sort of I liked elements of it, but and then you were sort of like, this thing's kind of not for me. Although
I was probably firmer than that, but yeah.
yeah.
Pervez says, my family and I all saw Joker, and we were big fans of the original. We all felt the same way. Didn't understand all the hate and enjoyed it. Saw Arthur/Joker in a more sympathetic light, by no means redemptive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and he also says, can't wait for y'all to discuss Saturday night, which we're going to be doing in just a second. But that the reaction to Joker has been interesting because there is kind of this fascinating spectrum among people who watched it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Right. And people who watched it is a pretty narrow demographic.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been extraordinary, the drop off that movie has seen. It may be the biggest gap I've ever seen between movie part 1, movie part 2.
Incredible. I mean, from $1 billion film to, I mean, it's made maybe 60 million, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Insane.
Yeah. So I mean, the public was not interested. Like, this completely separate from what we think of the movie. That opening weekend tells you that nobody cared enough to show up.
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah. It's not just, that's not the response to the film. People just didn't go.
Yeah, exactly.
Wild.
You know? So,
well, I mean, and you brought it up too. I mean, that's kind of been a DC issue as of late. I mean, you have Aquaman 2, same sort of thing, $1 billion movie, and then 2 just way underperforming.
I mean, what you can say about the movies from last year, the DC movies, is okay, maybe the whole DC reshuffling, that people were sort of aware of it, and they viewed all of those movies as kind of like a cul-de-sac.
Sure.
Maybe. With this one, certainly you say, well, generally speaking, that original movie is still pretty well regarded. People liked it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yet they didn't feel moved to go see the sequel. And that is interesting to me. Like Pervez went, right? So he by virtue of the fact that he actually experienced it, that makes him part of a very small group.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Did you see, I think it was Paul Schrader.
Oh, I did see that.
He's like, I hated it. I hate them. They're bad actors. They're terrible people.
Yeah.
I was like, ouch, okay.
See, that's the thing. And I appreciate hearing Parvez's represent another portion of the audience's experience, because I think we all kind of cover a spectrum here. For me, I was like, I actually kind of enjoyed the performances. I thought the cinematography was great. I thought, at least in the first half, I enjoyed the ideas introduced. So it was sort of a mixed to negative bag for me.
Yeah.
And there, I would say by and large, I'm just hearing hatred for it. But I like hearing the perspective of someone who did enjoy it, you know?
Sure.
So
yeah, it did very little for me. But I said this in a previous discussion, the earlier film, even as I thought, I enjoyed it when I watched it, but I've never felt moved to revisit it. So that I have a feeling a lot of people were there.
Sure.
Where it's like, yeah, I liked it, but I don't need to like go live in that world again, you know?
Right.
But actually, have you seen The Penguin yet? The series, the HBO series?
You know, no, I think the last regular episode I mentioned that I wasn't sure I was ready for the tone. Like I'd get there, but I was just needing lighter things at this moment.
Yeah.
But I saw like 2 seconds of it on HBO the other night, and I was like, you know what? No, maybe I do want to go to Gotham. So
okay.
I may start it. Where about you?
I haven't seen it yet. I do want to, but yeah, I'm just trying to carve out the time, you know?
Yeah.
Because my wife has not seen The Batman yet. And I feel like, well, if she's going to watch that, she'll probably watch The Batman. And again, this is actually, I mean, it's like only a problem in a very, superficial sense. There's too many people in my house. So
yeah, right.
So it's like I literally, like, I have shows I watch with certain people. I have shows certain people are not allowed to watch, and trying to it's very elaborate. I have like a pegboard in my study with yarn and mugshots and everything. Yeah, I'll get there. In the quick headline, I'll file this under headlines that are not news.
Okay. You have my curiosity.
Yeah, Disney has delayed the Blade sequel or Blade remake reboot indefinitely.
Right, I did see that.
I saw that and I was like, no shit. This movie is cursed.
Yeah. I don't know anything about it, but I thought I had read somewhere that it may take place in the past.
I think that was a version of it.
A
Yeah.
version. Maybe that's just it. It's like, well, what do we do? Do we do something that feels like it could seamlessly bleed into whatever the next movie is, or he can show up in Avengers, or so, you know what I mean? Or do we do like a wild take kind of thing?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are a lot of cooks in that kitchen and a lot of different ideas. And I have to say, I'm all for the wild take personally.
I agree with that.
I saw the Captain America trailer again this past week,
Mhm.
and I was like, I love that this doesn't look like a Marvel movie. Like, just visually,
Yeah.
it just looks like kind of like a '90s political thriller, and that alone, just for me specifically, like in my weird sensibilities, that's enough to make me feel excited about that kind of thing again. Because I just, things for a minute, even just visually, were starting to look a little samey.
Yeah.
I love the idea of. I still think it's cool that they all connect. I hope they continue to do that. But I just love the idea that I may not know exactly what I'm getting when I step into each Marvel film. And so I like that about Captain America. And I would like that for Blade if they're going to make it,
I know that this was a joint that Mahershala Ali went in there. He's like, yo, I want to play Blade. And they're like, we're going to make this happen. And I'm like, man, just do it for him, right? This is, Channing Tatum got to play Gambit finally in like a joke cameo. And I'm like, let's not do that to Mahershala like 15 years down the line,
Yeah.
I've seen like all the, people like, hey, Wesley was right. And he's like, only one Blade, only ever going to be one Blade. Which is what he says in Deadpool and Wolverine, which I think is funny, but also I have to say that is Sticky Fingers Erasure.
Wait, what?
Because there was a Blade TV series starring Kirk Sticky Fingers Jones as Blade.
Oh man, this is like, I can't tell if I'm creating this in my mind or if I'm actually remembering this. Was this like a syndicated thing?
I think it was on Spike TV, so maybe worse than syndicated. I don't know.
where the Spaceballs cartoon resided.
That's right. Wasn't that G4?
G4. That's the only pitch meeting I've ever been into where literally like the stereotype you'd see on a show like Entourage or something. As Sean Coyle and I were pitching, the guy was looking at his phone. G4.
Now, here's the thing. In terms of post-endgame, post-credit sequences,
yes,
there have been many, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of them have been pretty, like, forgettable.
Sure.
Right? Like, I mean, I'm struggling. There was, like, Harry Styles.
Yes.
In that one. And there was, remember the at the end of Thor, it was the guy from the what's the Jason Sudeikis show?
Oh yes, playing Hercules.
What's the guy's name? Brett something.
Kent. Shoot, what's his name?
What's the show? God, I sound like such a grandpa. Ted Lasso, the guy from Ted Lasso.
Yeah, I can't think of his name, and I've seen him do stand up.
Yeah, so he's Hercules.
Yes, and then of course Doctor Strange. We had Charlize Theron, for goodness sake, show up.
All of these utterly like spaghetti at the wall. Post-credit scenes, right?
Yep.
And yet what I said at the end of Eternals, you've got what's his name, Kit Harington, he's about to pick up that sword, and you hear Mahershala Ali off camera where he's like, don't do that, or whatever he says, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was like, that voice was the most interesting thing about that whole movie.
Yeah.
So I'm like, dude, let's just get this movie going. Come on.
I know.
People will watch it. I mean, it has to be good, obviously. We should stipulate that. But people will watch it.
Well, they're in a weird spot, right? I mean, this is not new news, but I mean, whatever this previous phase or the phase we're still in has not hit, I'm sure, like they imagined and like previous phases. And so they probably had like an all hands on deck meeting. And not only are they probably pivoting a little bit, Well, we know they're pivoting from things
Clearly.
but I mean, also maybe it's not overthinking, but just thinking hard about what it is they want to do with things that maybe a couple of years ago they're like, let's try this.
Well, good luck to them.
Sure, I'll be there.
That's what I have to say to that.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, we're ready to have this conversation. These movies have been out for a little while now.
Yes.
We're catching up.
Yep.
So
Saturday Night and The Apprentice.
Yeah, so we're going to start off. We're going to talk about the supervillain origin story set in the seedy world of 1970s New York about a man with a wild vision no one took seriously, who ended up defying the critics, taking command of huge swaths of our popular culture, and even now, as he approaches his 80s, he refuses to give up power over his fiefdom. And then we'll talk about the Donald Trump movie.
Very, very good. Very good.
I took us on a walk there.
No, that was, I mean, as you were saying, I was like, wow. It's pretty good.
Now, I should say, I don't consider Lorne Michaels a supervillain.
Sure. No, of course. But it's a great
However, I think there are some people who do.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting figure. You know, he it's funny, for as much as he gets talked about and impersonated, and as we see him in interviews, he still feels kind of mysterious. I mean, listening to the podcasts I do, Fly on the Wall with Dana Carvey, David Spade, you know, it's everyone sort of drops a line that he said to them that was like, you know, very mysterious and it stuck with them, that they're like, I still think about the thing. I'm not sure I quite get it, but I will spend my life trying to understand what he meant. You know, like, so he remains like a really interesting figure, you know?
And I should say, you know, this is a line of his that is sort of central to this film, but it is a line that's been part of my vernacular for the more than a decade. The show doesn't go on because it's ready. The show goes on because it's 11:30. And I use that in my classes all the time.
Yeah.
So I was ahead of the curve on that. Now, Saturday Night has been out in theaters for a couple weeks now. It's not doing particularly well, which, if I'm being honest, is not hugely surprising to me.
No. Yeah. Not surprising. It's very niche. I'd say, you know, it's topic, not just Saturday Night Live, but an era of Saturday Night Live that many, many people, I mean, including myself, never saw. Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen it in reruns, or I've seen it on DVD or something like that, but I'm right. I mean, even like a lot of the cast members, there were certain people, of course, there were people I knew, Belushi, you know, Jane Curtin, people like that, Chevy Chase, of course, but there were some I'm like, you know, I don't really know that person, you know, so I'm not surprised, but I do love it. I do love that it exists.
Yes.
Well, I'm very curious what you thought of it.
So this is an interesting movie. So Jason Reitman, this feels like his One for Me movie.
Totally, yeah.
Having done the Ghostbusters revivals, and I'm at an interesting place because I really enjoyed it, like as a theme park ride almost, you know. It which is a weird thing to say but you know, it has this propulsive energy.
Yep.
It's ostensibly it's a real-time telling of the 90 minutes leading into the first Saturday Night Live broadcast. It's very enrapturing, you know, the great performances and the energy really gets you through it. So I enjoyed all of that. But as somebody who has read up on the history of this era and is somewhat familiar, I mean, I'm not a scholar, I'm like, man, this is like 50% fabricated.
Yeah. No, I mean, this isn't a history lesson.
Right. And what's funny is, I mean, you know, you say like Lorne Michaels is sort of cloaked in mystery and whatever, but we've seen enough of him. And I'm like, Gabriel LaBelle is playing no version of Lorne Michaels that has existed for the last 35 years, I'm going to say.
True, and also at the same time, I mean, we'll get into this with The Apprentice, but I really enjoyed his impersonation because he wasn't trying to just do a voice.
Yes, I
You
definitely
know,
agree with that.
there was certain words that he would hit where you go, "Oh, there it is," or he would even the way he would sort of like purse his lips
Hmm.
or something, and you're like, "Wow, it's like the spirit of him." And I thought he did a really great job.
I think as a way of depicting the manic energy going into a live TV broadcast, I loved that. I have a harder time believing that they were like deciding what sketches to put on that like close to air, like they not even deciding what sketches because they do that, but like doing sketches for the first time and seeing if they work. You know what I mean?
Right. When there's like an hour until
In those 90 minutes, I'm like, yeah, you have stuff like Lorne Michaels runs out to a bar and he meets Alan Zweibel, who becomes one of the writers, and we got to get John Belushi to sign his contract. And I'm like, come on, like
You know what's funny? I read about the contract thing, and that was true.
it was true, but not like him. He's like off skating on the,
Yes.
You know what I mean?
The way it was dramatized. I guess it was truly leading all the way up until broadcast. They were chasing him to sign his contract. And that's great. But yes, I agree. Like, I don't think he went out to Rockefeller Plaza, when there was like 20 minutes to air and he was ice skating. And yeah.
So my point is that's not, it's not a dig on the movie. I'm like, know that going in, that this is highly fictionalized.
Yeah.
But as something that evokes, let me put it this way, it's not factual, but it's truthful.
Totally. I'm sure this is a week's worth of events, maybe even more, crammed into a 90-minute time span. And so, like, exactly what you just said, probably not exactly what happened, but it's truthful in the spirit of what it felt like to get to 10:30 on a Saturday night or 11:30.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of the cast, Dylan O'Brien as Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
Man, he looked just like him.
Dude, I thought everybody did a really great job, even if they didn't resemble them, embodying the spirit of these really iconic people.
Corey Michael Smith as Chevy Chase. I loved him.
Mm-hmm.
He was great. He was, by the way, he was the Riddler on Gotham, on the Gotham TV show.
I'm looking at him on IMDb right now, and I'm just seeing it now. I can see the Riddler. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I was like, I know this guy. I know him, but he was terrific. He was really good in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But what's funny is both this and the next movie we're going to talk about both do that thing where it's like you have characters who are speaking with like knowledge of history.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Right. Where like one person says to Chevy Chase, I mean, it's the first day, first show has not even aired. And like, I think it's the Willem Dafoe character. He's like, you're going to be a big star. You could host your own talk show or something like that. I'm like, he has not even, like, the show has not even aired yet.
Right.
Like, he did one like kind of warm up in front of this audience.
Right.
Based on that.
Yeah, all the affiliates or something, right? He like
That's
went
right.
stood up and just kind of roasted everything, and but what I did enjoy about it is we are all very, very familiar with Saturday Night Live. I mean, obviously in the United States, I think even outside the United States to many degrees, and this movie did remind me what a feat it is, and like how disruptive it really was. I mean. Mm-hmm. If late night was, Carson, people who are established figures, talk show kind of thing, but to have this program come on where there are scripts at least having changes made to them up until they air, live, anything could go wrong. And somehow it all gets, I was reminded of like how hair raising it must be to put on this show recently, because I think 1 or 2 weeks ago in 2024, one of the shows they trimmed a sketch, I think, like live. They like just
I think it was the Ariana Grande episode. I think.
Yeah, like something. Oh, there was a technical error with the soundboard with Stevie Nicks, and so I think people who were watching it live saw, when they put up the card where it shows the artist and it says SNL, and there was it showed Stevie Nicks for a minute straight live on television because the soundboard wasn't working.
Oops.
Cut to commercial. They had basically an 8-minute commercial break. Showed Stevie Nicks, couldn't do the sketch that they had planned. I guess I read an account on Reddit from someone who was there. They're like, oh yeah, they were going to do another one of those film things with Kenan Thompson where he plays the character DeWatt, and they're like, cut. And then they showed something that was from the dress rehearsal instead. And so it wasn't meant to air, and you could actually see the cue cards in the sketch. And then cut to goodbyes. That's all we got. Like they're doing all that on the fly, and you're like, wow. Like all the 50 years later, it's still hair raising to do this thing. And so imagining putting on that type of show with that kind of quick thinking and unpredictability for the first time, I do feel like this movie made me remember or realize, oh yeah, this is crazy. Like this is kind of a crazy
without
thing.
A net.
Without a net to pull off, but also if you're the network, like what are we doing? Like who are these people? Chevy Chase is kind of like a lovable asshole, you know what I mean? Like, but he's kind of unpredictable. You got Andy Kaufman is unpredictable. You got all, and it's like, what is this thing going to be? And I do feel like the movie captured that, even if it went a couple steps too far, like you said, and just looking back as if we already know how it's going to go, and they can say certain lines that we already know will become true. But I really enjoyed the way that it captured that.
Yeah, and the sort of there was like the kind of walk and talk West Wing style of I think that really helps. He didn't get a ton to do, Lamorne Morris, other than being like, why am I here? But like he did such a good job of embodying Garrett Morris.
It was impeccable. It was incredible. Right? Yeah.
See, this is the thing. I go back and forth between the movie. The movie has this sort of hagiographic view of like, this show is so important, and I almost wish it would have leaned into the madcapness of it. Like let me put it this way: like there's a scene where Johnny Carson is on the phone and he wants to talk to Lorne Michaels. Right. And the backstory here is that Saturday nights they used to have reruns of Carson. And Carson was like, well, I want reruns to be on Fridays, then I can work one less day a week. So that's the only reason Saturday Night Live even became a thing. Right. And so you have Johnny Carson on the phone, and essentially we hear him. He's like, you better not mess this up or whatever. Right. And we have the Lorne Michaels character doing the equivalent of like being on the phone and doing like the talkie noise with his hands. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm like, well, I don't think Lorne Michaels would have reacted that way. And two, I don't think Johnny Carson would have reacted that way, because what does he care?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the worst comes to worst, they're just going to put Carson reruns on Saturday night. So,
Right. Like taking sort of a fact, where like, oh, this is why this show kind of existed, but turning it into a stake, manufacturing it into a stake.
Right. Like, and my point in bringing this up is we're talking 1975. This is not like past his prime Johnny Carson. This is at his peak Johnny Carson.
Right.
So the movie's presenting it like, oh, this new wave came in as these old fogies. And I'm like, well, I don't put Carson and Milton Berle at the same chronologically. Carson was a response to Milton Berle,
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, and I'm sure this bugged you too, what's up with this beef against Jim Henson?
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
It was weird, right? Because like they make Jim Henson was very subversive.
Yes.
He was not, like, the way the movie plays him, I'm like, that's just not Jim Henson.
They try to make him into like anyone who was on PBS is sort of a Mr. Rogers-esque type of innocent person. And there was conflict there where the SNL was like, why do we have the Muppets on here? And people didn't want to write for them. But they try to escalate that a litlittle bit by, Jim Henson being sort of like, well, I never.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that bugged me.
Yeah.
Because it felt unnecessary.
Yeah. Or to reuse your word, not truthful.
Yes.
Although the conflict there was truthful, but the execution or the portrayal of Jim Henson there might not exactly be truthful.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue that I had with that bit of it is that the Michael O'Donoghue character, he was the head writer, who by all accounts was pretty insufferable.
Yes. Yeah. I went after this movie. I went and read more about him, and yeah, it was. He doesn't sound like a very pleasant person.
Not a very pleasant person, and so the movie certainly nails that.
Yeah.
But my question is, how does the movie want us to feel about him? Because I found him insufferable.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing too. Going back to the Jim Henson thing, I think they plus that a little bit because they want us to see that these people, the SNL cast, are anti-establishment. Like they're rock and roll, they're punk rock, and they're gonna like change everything, man, kind of thing. And so in that spirit, then, well, O'Donoghue is kind of portrayed that way also, but he is more of an a-hole, maybe than some of the other people who are just rascals. And so it's true. I'd be very curious what the filmmakers would say they wanted us to feel about him, but I had the same reaction. I was like, I wouldn't want to be in a room with that guy.
Yeah, really. Yeah. I have to say, the guy who played Billy Crystal.
Yes.
Man, amazing.
Yep. And apparently that really did happen too.
Yes, that did happen.
Yeah, the way that his thing, he thought he was going to go on with a partner, performing partner, and then Lauren was like, "Can you make it this certain amount of time?" He's like, "No, I can't." He's like, "All right, you're out. She's in." That really did happen.
And he ended up becoming a cast member, 10 years later.
Yeah.
But that was sort of, he was just cut out of the show before it even aired.
Yeah. Something I was kind of curious to look up, which I didn't know. I doubt, but the whole thing with the stage being put together with the bricks.
Yeah.
And, it becomes more symbolic, like a metaphor about everyone finally coming together, like sort of ignoring the things, ignoring working together and being cohesive to put the show on and make it work. And by the end, everyone does come together and assists with the bricks. And whether or not that was true, I did like that.
I agree with that.
Yeah. That's like the type of thing that's made up and it's a metaphor that I'm like, yeah, I got it.
I think for me, what I push back on is this idea that, these cats are like on this whole other level of comedy, unlike all these straights, like George Carlin.
Right. Which, by the way, I don't remember who played him, but that was
Matthew Rhys.
Great. Oh man, he was incredible.
Yeah, that's from The Americans, and what was he? What was Perry Mason? He was on Perry Mason.
Oh, that's right. I remember him from The Post. Also, I remember him.
He was in The Post. That's right. Yeah, that's right. He was great. J.K. Simmons is Milton Berle. I don't have any issues with the casting, and it's a movie that I do recommend. But I'm like, I tend to, going in, look, this is a movie. If you want to read a history book. But some of the digressions from history, some are more forgivable than others, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also, I might throw out, if you don't have an interest or familiarity with SNL, I don't know that it's universal necessarily in its theme of a group of people coming together to put on a show. It feels very specific to this. Like it indulges a lot in, hey, it's this person, and hey, here's that conceit of the show that and it wasn't quite like the Weekend Update thing where Lorne Michaels is presenting Weekend Update, and then they're like, I'll give it to Chevy Chase. And
that was not, by the way, that was never going to happen. Lorne Michaels was never going to be doing Weekend Update.
Right. And so I do think there's a lot of specificity.
That's a weird change, though, right? Like,
yeah, I don't know where that comes from, or if that's from some sort of nugget of something that maybe in the very, very early goings on, they were like, well, I'll rehearse it until we find somebody. But then they decided for extra story bits to throw it into the 90 minutes here. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I do feel like this is a very specific story, and they do gaze a lot at very specific people and things that for us who know these people and enjoy this show specifically, I think that played a lot into what I enjoyed about watching it. And I would be kind of curious if someone who doesn't necessarily care about SNL as much, if they'd be like, okay, well, what was the point of that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point.
And I say that as someone who did enjoy it, but everyone here listening knows our history with SNL.
Yeah. Like I, after I got out of it, I was like, well, because I like to show in my media classes, I like to show movies about, the history of television, things like that. Like I screened Quiz Show, for example, and I was like, I don't think I would show this to my students because I don't think it would work on the necessary dramatic levels for it to really play, because I think the cultural markers are just too far removed.
Yeah. And again, I still liked it, but I could see if you tweaked it just a little bit and made the themes a little bit more, or the theme behind the events that are happening a little bit more universal.
Yeah.
Where it's like chasing Belushi for the contract, someone who's not sure they want to be a part of this. And again, like what I was saying, when it all comes together and everyone literally lends a hand brick by brick, coming together when they were not
like
together.
the Muppet movie, ironically enough.
Yeah. I think maybe it is so specific that it makes it its own kind of thing, which actually in a weird way makes it special, because if it's about Saturday Night Live, make it about Saturday Night Live. But to your point, maybe it's not universal enough that you would show it, like you say, in a media class.
Yeah.
About putting on a show. You would show the Muppet movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Brian, this is the archetypal thumbs up with an asterisk for me.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. Knowing our history again with the show, I think people like that are going to enjoy it, get something out of it, and enjoy it.
Get something out of it. Yeah.
But I do want, like, if I showed it to my dad, he'd probably be like, "And," like I don't, like, okay, it's like I do think a reverence for the show, at least a certain level of reverence for the show, helps.
Yeah, the movie sort of it culminates with the first sketch, the Wolverines sketch,
Yes,
and you have like everybody watching it, and then it's like essentially like it's the equivalent of like Apollo 13 landing, and the control room breaks into applause, and
yes.
Ed Harris is shedding manful tears, basically like, that's how the movie portrays it. And I'm like, I don't know that sketch is going to work for modern audiences.
I had the very same thought, because I thought the movie was going to end when the show began, because it was so all behind the scenes. But I thought, there will be no catharsis if I don't even see a tidbit of what it was they were working toward. And then it did occur to me, there's a lot of pressure on this first sketch to make us as an audience in 2024 feel like everything we just saw was all worth it.
Yeah.
Like pressure on people in 1975. It's something that they wrote 50 years ago.
Brian, what occurs, what it reminded me of is Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
Yeah. Which I have not seen, but I'm familiar with.
Right. So for those of you who don't know, that was an Aaron Sorkin created show. He had just come off of The West Wing, and he essentially did The West Wing, but about Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And and again, that's a show that I enjoyed. I probably enjoyed it more than most, but if there was a problem, it was that it put so much onus on what we're doing here is so important and so meaningful and so important. And it's so important that I said important twice. And then you show the sketch and it's like pimp my trike or whatever, I don't know about that, and that same year, same fall, within weeks, you had 30 Rock, which also premiered, which the whole approach there was, hey, it's all bullshit. It's bullshit in front of the camera. It's bullshit behind the camera. And that's hilarious. And that's the show that ended up lasting. Right. But there's the sense of like, oh, but this is so important. It's, at least underlying it, that undercuts it when it's like, oh, and that my Wolverine is full of eels or whatever, whatever he says, you're like, okay.
Yeah, right. This is what everybody was sweating and crying and bleeding over.
Yeah, yeah. So that's me. That's me on Saturday night.
This is great. I was very excited. I mean, it's so funny. I saw it about a month ago at this point.
And I just want to say this discussion is a perfect encapsulation of sometimes just the contradictions that you can have, where you're like, I found this flawed. I had a problem with this, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, with that, let's move on to our second. Weirdly, these movies are kind of simpatico with each other.
Yeah, I didn't realize it as much until your brilliant introduction there.
So The Apprentice hit theaters the same day as Saturday night, and this is directed by Ali Abbasi.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a chronicle of the early. I mean, it's the supervillain origin story of Donald Trump.
I mean, it really is. Yeah, it's how did he become who he became?
Yeah, and this one has also tanked pretty spectacularly here in the United States, and it occurred to me watching yesterday that I fully understand why it tanked, because I'm like, this is a movie aimed at no one.
I was wondering if we were going to feel the same way. You look right off the bat, I'll just say this movie is very watchable.
I was on board. I found it very compelling.
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't know if I even wanted to see it. I mean, not just like why, like
Yeah.
I got it. I've got my fill of this person, for the past several years, and I just kept hearing people be like, "Huh, well, I'll be damned, not bad." And so I'm like, what? Like I just had to. I was curious, and then a friend of mine was like, "Hey, do you want to go?" And that's what actually got me out of the house to go see it. And
see, so before you continue, so I should, give people a peek under the hood here. The way you and I were going back and forth about what we were going to discuss this episode, and I was like, "The Apprentice?" ? And I was like, literally, I was like, God, I just, I'm so sick of this guy. Like, I just don't want to. I don't want to hang out with him anymore. I just want to be done with him.
Yep.
And then you said, "Hey, I watched The Apprentice last night."
Yeah.
At which point my shoulders slumped. Yeah. And I was like, "Well, I guess I'm watching The Apprentice too." Then
you like grabbed your your fedora and keys, and like, all right, honey, I'm heading to the AMC.
That's basically what happened.
Like you got called into work after hours.
It kind of was like that, yeah. Because I was like, well, if you saw it, then we should have a conversation about it. And so anyway, that was my mindset going in. Sorry, I cut you off mid sentence. I apologize.
Well, no, I was just gonna sort of back up what you said. So at the end of the day, I found this movie very watchable. I was interested the whole way. When I walked out, I was like, yeah, it's not a bad movie. But it is. I also had the thought, who is this for?
Mm-hmm.
I think truly, whatever you walk in with, you will walk out with.
That is so apt, and it's entirely accurate.
Right? I mean, it's sort of like, I think most people can agree, despite their politics, that he's kind of a grotesque figure, a person, the things he says. I hear a lot of people who even like support him are like, well, I don't like what he says. I don't think he's a good guy. So you either admire his, I think both sides would agree, sort of bullyish tactics.
Yeah.
And so you go in going, oh, that's how he got that way. And that's how he got to become so strong. Or you will walk out and go, oh, that's how he got that way. That's how he became a blight on the soul of this country. This movie is a real Rorschach test, I feel, in that way.
Just to underscore the point that you're making, This is a tweet I saw from somebody who is a Trump supporter. Okay. Mm-hmm. And like real, I mean, down the line, whatever he does, he can't do any wrong, really like that. And he says, we just saw the new movie, The Apprentice. Call me crazy, but I don't think this is the OWN they wanted it to be. There was nothing really new in it, and it was interesting to see how he started.
There you go.
Right? And I read that. I was like, having watched the movie, I'm like, I don't think they intended it to be an OWN, honestly. I think it was just, they were trying to tell a story, which is a very old story about sort of, temptation by the devil and what it does to you.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. Just to wrap up that thought, or at least on my end, so I was thinking that like, oh, this is an interesting, Rorschach test of a movie. And then as the credits were rolling and I was seeing like the 20 producers or something, I did think, I wonder like why, and I mean, obviously the capitalizing on a moment, money, like this is the moment to make this movie. But I don't know, the story about their family, or the story about, something that's really important that filmmakers feel like I will go broke, but this movie must be made. And I was just sort of looking at those names and I was just kind of curious, like, I wonder why, and it's weird. Cause again, it was a very watchable movie, but you just kind of that was something I walked out kind of thinking. I would be curious to talk to those people and be like, what were you trying to tell?
I think a key part of this conversation has to be when we are watching it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So watching this movie about this really vile person, let's just say, 2 weeks before he may potentially become president again, hits different than watching this movie 6 months from now or 2 years ago.
Totally.
Right? So it's this, we're in this weird space, and what you said is so, like, we know what comes next, but we don't know what comes next.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, we know what comes next in the film, like he becomes president, but we don't know, well, does he become president again?
Yeah.
And so you're viewing this through this very specific temporal lens. That's not going to be the case, later on. But it is, just to echo the point you were making, it's fairly Dewey Cox-esque in terms of biopic tropes.
Yeah.
Right. Stuff like, oh, we got this slogan for Reagan. Let's make America great again. Huh. Let's make America
I like the
great.
sound of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Stuff like that,
mm-hmm.
where I'm like, okay, well, I don't know how true that is. Some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Now that all being said, I have to say, Sebastian Stan is excellent in this movie.
Him and Jeremy Strong.
Both of them.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I
had just earlier yesterday, in the afternoon, I watched The Big Short.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got in the car, I went to the theater and watched this. And Jeremy Strong is in both of them,
Yep.
Totally. I mean, he becomes, the way he like hunches over like a vulture, like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And his delivery, Jeremy Strong. But honestly, both of them, I think, with Sebastian Stan, he internalized sort of the affect, without sounding like James Austin Johnson or something on SNL.
Yeah, absolutely. It was sort of similar to the Lorne Michaels portrayal, where it's just certain words or just little sort of mannerisms, and you go, oh,
mannerisms. Yep.
It's very, very good.
Yeah, Sebastian Stan has found a nice sidelight playing like just shitty people. between this and the Tommy Lee thing,
or not Galooly. What's his name? The Tanya Harding.
It was Galooly, wasn't it?
Right. That's not the other guy, is it?
Oh, is that? Yeah. See,
Walter Hauser's character. I can't remember.
That's Jeff Galooly.
Yeah. I can't remember the guy's name.
Who's the other guy?
I don't know. Whatever.
No. It is Galooly. He played Galooly.
Okay.
But also the Tommy Lee, Pamela Anderson thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So he does the Winter Soldier over here, and when he's not doing that, he plays history's vile people.
Right. That's so funny. But yeah, I gotta say, I was really, I was on board every step of the way with this story. It was really interesting. It's one of those tales you've kind of seen before, where a mentor recognizes a person who's a bit of a blank slate and then takes them under their wing and tries to teach them their ways and their awful ways. But then that person takes those ways and basically turns on the mentor. That's always compelling stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And speaking of the mentor, Roy Cohn, good Lord, the whole arc of that character is just like, and it's interesting too, because by the end I found myself feeling bad for him, but I was like,
yep,
this guy sucks.
No, he's a bad guy. I had that exact same feeling.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's a bad guy. He kind of, this is like karmic retribution,
It's like, I don't want to say that, but like, yeah, yeah, without getting into specifics, but there's this whole sort of moment at the end with like a gift that's given to him and a realization. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, this is palpable stuff. Like, I was really feeling it, and him sitting across the table and looking at Donald with certain sorts of feelings and just sort of in his state. And I was like, damn, like, so yeah, I walked out like, no, that was a good movie.
Look, as far as I'm concerned, Harry Cohn, he sat at Joseph McCarthy's right hand. He was a closeted gay man who used other people's homosexuality as a weapon against them. Yep. He is on the wrong side of everything.
He's despicable. Yes.
Right. So the arc of what's depicted in the film is essentially accurate to what happened, and I'm like, you know what, couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, you know. But definitely, you see how sort of the wet clay of who Donald Trump was affected by these negative influences, right? I've said this for years, man. I'm like, God, what a benefit to the world if Fred Trump would have said "I love you" to his son once in a while,
Right.
right? I mean, what a piece of shit that guy was, right? So I mean, this is, you know, it's sort of like Succession, you know. While we're talking about Jeremy Strong, where, you know.
Yeah.
That's my problem with that show. I can't get into it because I'm like, these are all awful people.
I have a hard time with that. There are shows that I would like to watch that I know the writing's great, I know the performances are great, but I just don't want to live in that world with those people. Yeah.
So with this movie, it's like, well, it's 2 hours and out. You know, you're done.
Exactly.
And that helps.
Yep.
But yeah, going back to what I was saying before, it's aimed at a non-existent audience because we sort of watched it out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
But I would imagine most people who vehemently dislike and detest Donald Trump have no interest in paying money to hang out with him, origin story or no.
Mm-hmm.
And then the super fans, notwithstanding this idiot on Twitter, and I call him an idiot because I've seen his feed and it's just a bunch of toxic nonsense. But they're going to be like, "Oh, it's Hollywood and they're doing this, and I don't want to watch that." So who's the audience?
Right? Yeah.
I mean, it's it's aimed at nobody, right?
Yeah, award season maybe. I don't.
Possibly. I mean, I could very easily see possibly both of these guys getting nominations off of this.
Same. But again, I just keep coming back to, like, I was engaged the entire time.
No, it's a thumbs up from me. It is a thumbs up from me.
Same.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too. I mean, seeing the tenets, the sort of philosophies that Cohn gives to Trump, because like you said, wet clay, that's a good way of putting it. Like, he's someone who doesn't have the confidence, but he's willing to be molded, and he is cutthroat. He just doesn't have the boldness at first,
right,
to do that, and then to see where he adopts those sensibilities and principles and then turns them on his own mentor, and you know, by the end of the movie is spouting this stuff as if it's his own ideas and win at all costs, and then, you know, no matter what, even if you lose, say you won, you know, those sorts of things that we sort of recognize now. It's just, yeah, it's a fascinating rise and fall story.
Yeah, in terms of Harry Cohn.
Cohn and even Trump. I mean, to me, well, you could say he rose, but I mean, if you
from like a
you know what I mean,
like a moral fall.
Yeah, whether he ever began, I don't know. A movie actually isn't quite clear on that, but by the end, you see him buying fully into the things that even, you know, the Cohn character might even be like, well, you know,
yeah. I mean, the ironic thing is that the movie ends with him talking to Tony Schwartz, who he wrote The Art of the Deal with, and Tony Schwartz is about as vocal a Donald Trump critic as there is out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you realize, like, all of these people that played a role in burnishing this myth own the consequences of that. You know,
sure.
Like, I just saw a thing last week where one of the producers of The Apprentice is like, "God damn, we didn't know what the show, The Apprentice, the show. I mean,
yeah,
not the movie. It was like, we didn't know what we were doing, you know." And I'm like, and by the way, so I get out of the theater, and, you know, I put in my AirPod and I just turn on the news for the day, and it's like, Trump's former chief of staff is talking about his longest running chief of staff, John Kelly, is talking about how he would talk about how much he admired Hitler, right? And I'm like, this is all just too real for me. Like, I can't.
I know.
Like, you know, reality and fiction are just too close together right now. This is just a lot.
Yeah. I know.
You know?
So there you go. I mean, that's also like a good thing to sort of couple this with. Like, I mean, yeah, it's funny. It's the thumbs up from both of us.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of great craft here, and I think there is a compelling story here, but it is also, do you want to do this? Do you want to go on this ride? That's kind of up to you.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, isn't it?
I want to say too, stylistically, I like a lot of the things that Elia Bassi did as a director. The stock would change from shot to shot.
Mm-hmm.
There were certain shots that looked like they were shot on video, or maybe it was like a video filter.
I love that. Yeah, I guess in
Yeah.
the 70s, it looked like it was shot on 16 millimeter, which, by the way, a
That's right.
Saturday Night was filmed on 16 millimeter, which was pretty cool.
That's right. It was.
And yes, and then when it got into the 80s, it had this sort of like a videotape that had been taped over a couple times.
Yeah.
You know, where you'd see little color line bleed throughs on the screen, like a old videotape. That was very cool.
See, you know what I would have liked in this movie? Just a shot of Trump walking down, in Uptown, and Finn Wolfhard is trying to give him a flyer.
I would love that.
Right? Just this little thing, and we're like, wow, cinematic universe.
Holy crap. Yeah. And like 0.03% of the movie-going public is like, I got that reference.
Yeah, we'd be like Leo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, pointing at the screen.
Exactly.
Worth mentioning, Maria Bakalova, who plays Ivana Trump, she was really good in this too.
Yeah. She, actually, I couldn't help but feel kind of happy for her as I was seeing her on screen, just knowing, I think she did some sort of like Zoom audition to be in Borat 2.
Yeah,
which was like a huge break for her, and now she's turning up all over the place. So,
I mean, wasn't she like nominated for an Oscar for Borat?
That may be, huh? Yeah, I don't remember. That was one of those like wild COVID years, but I believe it. I remember she was pretty amazing.
Yeah. She was nominated for an Academy Award for Borat.
Yeah.
And she's in like Unfrosted and a lot of stuff. But no, it's tough, right? To play that character. And I think she imbues her with a certain amount of pathos,
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. So, hey, I guess both of these would be thumbs up with asterisks.
Yeah, like you said with the first one, the very definition. So hopefully people hear what we said and can apply whatever they feel and make the decision if they find these films worth it.
There you go. And that's a good place to leave this discussion. But if you've got some comments on our comments, hey, you can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast. Brian, you want to pitch our Patreon?
Yes, as we alluded to earlier in the show, we now have a Patreon. And one of the big reasons for starting that was while we've always had ads throughout our show, we've been receiving feedback lately that we have a lot more ad breaks popping up as people are listening along. And that is actually something that's out of our control. So Zachy and I decided, well, hey, let's start up a Patreon, and then we can offer a version that would be ad-free for people who are interested in that and able to subscribe. So if you go to patreon.com/moviefilmpodcast, there you'll find all of our previous commentaries, all without ads. And you will also receive all our future commentaries and episodes absolutely ad-free. Now, we always want people to know that the version with ads that is free will always be available to anyone who wants to continue listening that way. But for $5 a month, if you subscribe at Patreon, that subscription will help support us and the sustainability of producing this show and allow you to receive a more pleasurable listening experience of the commentaries and episodes. So if you're interested and able, head to patreon.com/moviefilmpodcast. And for $5 a month, again, you get all the past commentaries ad-free. You'll get all future commentaries and episodes absolutely without ads. To all the people who have already headed over there, thank you so much. And for the people who are considering going over there now, we very much appreciate it.
There you go. And if you're looking for me online, you can find me on social media at Zachy's Corner. That's ZAKIS Corner. I'm also at the San Francisco Chronicle and IGN and The Wrap. And Brian is still got episodes of Young Jedi Adventures up on Disney Plus.
Exactly. You can find them on the air on Disney Junior and streaming on Disney Plus.
And with that, on behalf of my partner Brian Hall, my name is Zachy Hassan. This has been Movie Film 302. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, folks.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy